Morning, everybody. That was a very kind introduction. Hopefully there's not too many mic drop moments. Mike Moore is one of the original T2RL people. So T2RL helps companies buy technology, buy distribution systems. And of the 6 names that were put up on the screen yesterday by Travel in Motion, by Danny, we have worked on 3 of them. And there are 2 other contracts, unfortunately, that we can't talk about at this time. So we have a pretty substantial market share in the world moving forward to offers and orders. The most recent contract was Air France KLM, and that was completed in record time. So just so you know, they actually started the project in October, and we were done pretty much by the end of the year to write a bunch of contracts with a couple of suppliers. But most notably, the largest supplier was Amadeus. So we know what it takes to get the contracts done. So if you need our help, we would be delighted to help you out there. If you're going to build it yourself, please don't talk to us. We can't help you. I've been asked to talk about the long climb. So it's long and it's a climb because it's a challenge. And I think the industry is going to find a difficult year for 2025. Modern retailing systems, building the infrastructure is definitely going to take time. And the first question is, are we on a climb? Is this real? Should we be doing this? Should we be thinking about it? Are we really going to move away from P&Rs and tickets, or are they with us forever? The answer from our perspective is, we are definitely going to move. It doesn't make sense to do what we do today. It makes it much harder. And I think Joost yesterday said some very interesting things. We can do these things, but the workaround took them 2 years. And I think that's the challenge, is we need to modernize the infrastructure, but there's a lot of moving parts and it's very, very complicated. Somewhat problematic for adoption is the fact that we can actually achieve some of the benefits that we would get from continuous pricing in the current infrastructure. And our friends at ATPCO have definitely made that a lot easier. But the reality is the last mile will be worth it. We think that servicing will actually improve. And there's a bunch of technologies out there that should make life a lot simpler. And we also think the simplification of the application portfolio will make life a lot easier. And whilst we don't believe IATA's job is to drive anything about competition, we believe that T2RL's job is to drive competition. So there will be some competition. We do believe that the code share and interline issues will be resolved. And I'm going to say, to the satisfaction of the airlines, there's just too much revenue at stake, too much partnership in the industry today. And that will become even more important in the world where, if you think about it, borders are closing and not opening. So the reality is Interline will not flounder in the wilderness forever, and we will sort this out. So now I'd like to take you through a kind of a plan and walk you through some of the implications that we see if you move towards offers and orders, and maybe a little bit of how might you approach the strategy? And I think Danny said yesterday, every airline is different. PSS contracts end at different times. GDS contracts end at different times. Revenue integrity, revenue accounting, all of these systems that we've built up over many, 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 many years means that your airline will have a different path. But in general, you'll need to be thinking about some pretty important steps to get this right. So let's see if I can work the clicker. So apologies for the quality of slides. This is not BCG. This is not Bain. This is people who get things done. Sorry. Did I say that? So let's start with a 30 million fictitious passenger carrier, full service air, T2RL Air. Yeah. We signed a contract for PSS in 2017. we ended up implementing in 2019. The contract for PSS is 10 years long, and 12 to 24 months is a reasonable time for a migration for a PSS. A smaller airline might be 12 months, a larger airline might be more than 24 months, but that's the reality today. Let's think a little bit about the distribution mix of our airline. Our airline has two main channels. It has a direct channel, which is web and mobile, and it has a GDS channel. Traditional GDS using Edifact, working through the PSS, and all of the things that come with that, like revenue integrity, ticketing, revenue accounting, all of those things that we've had to build and we've used to automate over the years, got better and better at it. Automated refund and exchange and so on. The GDS agreements also existed, and GDS agreements tend to be much shorter than PSS agreements. That's probably a good thing. So in 2019, we've got some GDS agreements that are 3 years in 3 years in length. And many of you won't have GDS agreements that end on the same date, but you'll have to think about making them coterminous, because if you make any changes to the content that you wish to distribute, you'll have to think about non-discrimination. You'll have to think about how that would apply. So here we are, and I think most of the airlines would be in this kind of a situation. Now, in my world, this 30 million passenger carrier has about 60% online and 40% through the GDSs. And that's because we were successful in negotiating with our PSS provider, who also happens to be a GDS provider, to get some carve-outs for web fares. And the reason they gave us carve-outs for web fares was because we were going to spend a bit more money on shopping and a bit more money on look to book and a bit more money on e-commerce. And that's why they gave us the right to do that. And because they were the largest GDS PSS supplier, the other GDSs had to follow suit. Right? So that's an advantage that T2L had over everybody else. So if you could scroll up, that would be helpful. There's no COVID in this world. All right? So if I put an added COVID, and then we got into the discussion about minimums, and we got into the discussion about what happened during COVID, it would spoil the whole show. So I killed it off. Okay. So our first step is what? We're going to look and see how we want to adjust our distribution. We're looking at the OTAs. We think there's a great opportunity for Direct Connect. We're looking at our relationship with the GDS. We're thinking a bit about dynamic pricing. We're not really sure what we're going to do about that. But we decided that if we were going to do dynamic pricing, NDC would be a great way to do that. So why don't we go forward with NDC? And then somebody radical inside T2L said, hey, maybe we should connect the GDSs using this and get rid of Edifact. And this is not Finnair. So we ran an RFP, and RFPs take a time. They take a lot less if you use us, but we took some time and we selected an NDC provider. Now, the GDS parity agreements took 8 months to negotiate. So in order to get to that point on the timeline, we had to spend 8 months with 3 GDSs negotiating the parity agreement. Okay, so you'd think, well, why? Well, because we were going to pay more. We had to think carefully about what we were willing to pay, and it took some time. When we selected an NDC provider that wasn't the PSS provider, that negotiation took a bit longer than it needed to, because they're not very cooperative with allowing third-party pieces of infrastructure. And we had to modify the PSS agreement in order to be able to do that. So as you think about your journey and as you think about the long climb, you have to think about the impact on all of your contracts and what is going to happen in the process as you select alternative technologies and you work to integrate them. Luckily, there's a great pattern for integrating availability and for creating offers via NDC. So what do we do next? Well, we had to think about whether those contracts would need to be extended. So we needed to negotiate, and that's why it took 8 months. We needed to negotiate the ability to extend those contracts. and make sure that the inflation rate that gets applied during those contracts at the end of the term of the current agreement doesn't go into stratospheric numbers. All vendors want inflation protection, and all airlines want no inflation. The NDC provider was also very keen to have a long-term agreement. And we thought that, well, actually, maybe the PSS provider or the future OSD provider might be able to supply these services. So we didn't want to commit to too long a period, but we had to think about it. So we ended up at a 5-year term. Now, we decided that in 2024, continuous pricing was a must-have. Our competitors were all doing it. We were getting a little bit left behind. Luckily, we'd come out and we'd had a chat with ATP Co. and 3 Victors, and we were able to sit down and get a lot of data from 3 Victors on what our competitors were doing. So even if we didn't have competitive pricing, we didn't have continuous pricing, we were able to respond quickly by using some tools that our friends at ATP Co. had supplied. So we were able to make some adjustments and file a lot of fares. And as they said yesterday, anybody who didn't follow that, is the number of fares has been increasing, not declining. It's been increasing. So the long-term strategy was we wanted to work towards offer, order, settle, and deliver. Now, we put in place a piece of infrastructure on top of our PSS with NDC. We put into place some dynamic capabilities around dynamic pricing. Actually, what we've done is we bought some revenue management capabilities, but we'd allow that contract to move to offer management. Now, offer management is a lot bigger and a lot more complicated than revenue management, right? We have all of the capabilities that normally we need at the back end of the process brought forward into the offer management process. And that makes the application, I'd say, bigger, and you could argue more complicated, but actually creating a single price with our RBDs might be a little bit simpler. So we're trading off here in the long term. The idea that we have to think about every step long before we take it means we need to leave a number of options open. So that means being able to terminate an application in an agreement, not pay for it, and be able to integrate other applications. So the world of interoperability is really a contractual issue, and we could argue the technology will solve this. It will help us solve this issue. What becomes harder is the contracting and the ability to swap things in and out of scope in a reasonable period of time at a reasonable and sensible cost, and not to increase all the time our costs. So this is kind of the thought process. I take a step towards dynamic pricing. In order to deliver that dynamic pricing, I need NDC. I then take a step to offer management. I then think about what happens after offer management, and I think about replacing the PSS with OSD. There is no single solution today out there that you can buy off the shelf, like we used to for PSS, for OSD. The vendors are all building things as we speak, and continue to build things, and will continue to build things for some time. We do not have off-the-shelf capability today for all parts of the process. So when you think about the challenge you have, this is what you have to be thinking about. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the numbers tied to the strategy, because I've only got 5 minutes left, and that really isn't a lot of time. So if anybody wants to come and have a chat with us, there's 6 of us here, actually, from T2RL. Please knock on the door. We don't have a booth, but we'll be outside. You know who I am. So I want to run through the numbers, and this is going to be very quick. And I will share this with those of you that come to us, because I don't want to distribute this widely, but let's talk about this. So this is the distribution mix. Obviously, we have top-line growth in terms of volume. at about 2.5%, if I have a look. Yep, about 2.5%. And their distribution mix, and you can see that we implemented NDC. Here it is down here, tiny, teeny number here. And remember, we would have had to absorb the difference in cost between a full content GDS agreement and now a GDS parity agreement. And that cost, there will be some costs, and we'll show you what the costs look like. But here's a model. It's just theoretical. This isn't real. This isn't SAS. This isn't one of our customers. This is just a model, just a way to think about the problem. So let's talk about the GDS fees. So GDS unit costs per PB. So remember, that's on 40% of the total. That's not on 100% of the total. And I've just brought it back to a per PB basis because we love PBs. Passengers boarded, love them. But this is the kind of price differential you would expect to go from a full content to a GDS parity, or worse. They're big numbers. You notice I didn't talk about surcharge. So what happens? On the e-commerce side, you can pick the e-commerce cost, and that grows over time, a little bit slower than perhaps the unit costs for NDC. NDC is ridiculously expensive relative to the services that it applies. Sorry, but it is. Can't stand the idea of paying for an API more than I pay for an e-commerce booking. That's just ridiculous. But anyway, it is what it is because the market is what it is. I'm going to talk for about, 1 minute and 35 seconds about what should have happened with offer, order, settle, deliver. Our world said there's a bunch of services on the left-hand side as you look at the screen here. What should have happened is that we should have seen a cost reduction when we moved to offer, order, settle, deliver. We've simplified things. We've made it easier. It should be cheaper. And for whatever reason that we decided, we said that about 13% price differential over 10 years would give you a positive business case, i.e., you would be saving money in the long run. Therefore, you should move to OSD because it will be cheaper and the business case will deliver. Now, as you know, we said that we have about 50% world market share. Before we executed those contracts, we postulated that, in fact, the price for OSD relative to PSS would go up. And the reason for that was there's a lot of benefit for the airline in moving to continuous pricing, and the vendors will price in that value. And therefore, the price will go the other way. Now, I can't comment on any of the contracts that we've done, but I like to say that sometimes we're just right. What that means is that we believe overall offer, order, settle, deliver should be about 10 or 11% more expensive when you look at everything that comes into consideration. But that's buying it as a lump, and I'm going to say not as components, because you will have to take into account the cost of integration and some of the support services. So I'll just click back there for those of you that wanted to take a picture. So that is the PB fee on the left for all that stack of services. That's not a single PB fee. That's a whole bunch of services that includes complicated revenue management. So for those of you in the room, O&D, complex revenue management, a lot of availability processing, and that's what you would end up with. And then you look at the costs over time. So that you can see the 1.277 is here, and then you can see the price for OSD is on the left. So this is our model. I have 1 minute left to finish this. So why are we doing this? We're doing this because this generates more revenue. So there is a little revenue uptick when we implement this. And on this model, the base fare per segment, per passenger flown was $150. We upped that by $10. We added all of the costs, so you can see the contribution, and we are better off. Our revenue top line is growing by 1%. If I look at all of the costs and all of the breakdown, So I've got NDC, I've got the cost of GDS parity, I've got the offer management system, I've got the cost of e-commerce, and the offer management system is only over a period of time here. So 3 years, the long climb, 3 years I have to pay more on top of what I'm already paying. But overall, my costs are rising by 3%, but my overall costs are 0.63% over time, unit costs. Remember, that's divided by the total number of passengers. So as the volume grows, the unit costs are slower in growth. So what's going to happen? There's a long climb. It's going to take a while. There's more cost. But you're going to have to think carefully about the structure, carefully about the approach. You're going to have to think about a strategy that encompasses all parts of the business, looks at e-commerce, looks at your channels, and build yourself a strategy based on your contracts and your timing that works for you. And we'd be delighted to help any of you or all of you get to where you need to get to. Thank you very much. Thank you.